You ever get that feeling like the ground's shifting under your feet, what you thought was solid isn't anymore, and you're just not sure where to step next?
Yeah, that feeling. It's pretty common, this kind of uncertainty. And it's something people have actually been thinking about for, well, a very long time.
Hmm.
There's this one perspective, especially from a French thinker back in the 19th century, that really sheds some light. His ideas feel surprisingly relevant now.
Okay, I'm intrigued. A historical take on feeling. Well, totally modern. So, our plan today for this deep dive is to really get to grips with that idea. Where did it come from? Why does it still, hit home? We're going to explore something called anomie.
Exactly. Anomie.
Yeah.
And the person who really developed this concept was Émile Durkheim. He was a huge figure in sociology.
Durkheim. Got it. So
Yeah.
break it down for us. What does anomie actually mean in, plain English?
At its most basic, it means a state where social norms, the sort of shared rules and values that guide how we act, start to weaken or even just disappear.
Normlessness. Okay.
Yeah, the usual expectations society has, they get fuzzy.
So it's not just about me feeling lost, it's bigger. Something happening across society.
That's the key. It's a social condition.
Mm.
And Durkheim really dug into this in a couple of major books. First, The Division of Labor in Society, back in 1893.
Right.
His argument there was, as work gets more and more specialized, society needs rules and shared understandings to keep up. If those regulations lag behind, you can get anomie.
Ah, so if everyone's off in their own little world doing their specific job, it's harder to agree on the big picture stuff, like how we should all connect.
Precisely.
Mhm.
And then he developed it further in his study Suicide from 1897. This is where he talks about anomic suicide.
Okay.
And the really interesting part here is that he found this type of suicide wasn't just linked to bad times like economic crashes.
Hold on. Hardship leading to despair. Sadly, that kind of makes sense. But you're saying it can happen when things are going well too, like economically.
That's the really crucial and kind of counterintuitive point he made. Yes. Suicide rates could also spike during periods of sudden prosperity, rapid economic booms.
Wow, why?
Because, he argued, the underlying issue is the same. Disruption. Whether it's a sudden crisis or sudden wealth, the old rules, the established social order people relied on, it just gets thrown out of whack.
So it's less about having or not having things and more about how change, especially rapid change, messes with our sense of stability and where we fit in.
Exactly that. The familiar limits, the moral guidelines that gave life structure and meaning, they become blurred. Suddenly you might have, limitless possibilities, but without the old guardrails, people feel lost, utterly adrift,
Yeah.
like being tossed into the ocean without a compass, even if the water seems calm for a bit.
That paints a picture. Okay, so if we wanted to list the main ingredients of anomie, what are the key features, the signs?
Well, number one is that normlessness we mentioned.
Yeah.
Real uncertainty about what's right or wrong, what's expected, because the old social rules just don't have the same hold.
Like, with new tech, suddenly the old rules about privacy or how we talk to each other just don't quite cut it anymore.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
And that often leads to the second thing, a feeling of disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
Detachment from society.
Uh-huh.
People feel cut off from institutions, maybe their community, from any kind of shared belief system, like they're not really anchored anywhere.
That feeling of being alone in a crowd, I get that.
Exactly. Which feeds into number three, moral confusion. It's hard to find purpose or direction when the signposts you used to rely on are gone or unclear. You start questioning, where do I fit? What's the point?
And this whole state's anomie, it doesn't just pop up randomly, right?
Yeah.
It's usually triggered by big societal shifts.
Absolutely. It tends to arise during times of really fast, deep change. Social, economic, cultural upheaval. Think Industrial Revolution, aftermath of wars, big market crashes.
Or maybe huge technological shifts, like we're seeing now.
Definitely. Those kinds of events shake the foundations. They disrupt the shared norms that usually hold things together.
Okay, that makes the theory clear. But let's bring it to today. How does this actually show up in our lives now? The source material mentions some modern examples.
Yeah, and I bet some of these will sound familiar, maybe things you've felt or seen around you. Take the gig economy, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
or just precarious work in general.
Right, jumping between short-term contracts, no clear career path maybe, no solid professional identity.
Exactly. No fixed routines, often fewer protections like unions used to provide, that can really lead to feeling worn out, emotionally tired, and just not connected to a stable work community with shared rules and expectations. It fosters that detachment.
Yeah, that clicks. What about social media? That feels like a landscape where the rules are, well, constantly changing or just weird.
It's a fascinating case. You've got algorithms pushing engagement, right? Not necessarily promoting, say, a moral compass or thoughtful interaction. Sure. Plus, you have this endless choice in how you present yourself online. You can craft so many identities. It can lead to this weird existential confusion, maybe even burnout, trying to navigate it all without clear, shared norms of how to be authentic online.
Like, you can be anyone online, so who are you really?
That's the question it raises.
Yeah.
And then think about post-COVID.
Oh, definitely.
That whole period forced a massive rethink for so many people. Work, relationships, what actually matters. Old routines vanished, and figuring out the new normal has been slow, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. Still feels like it sometimes.
And that definitely contributed to widespread anxiety, that feeling of being adrift we talked about.
I felt that for sure. Total flux. The last example was rapid urbanization.
Right. In huge, sprawling cities, you're physically close to millions, but those traditional community bonds, the ones you might find in smaller towns, they can weaken. So you can end up feeling quite isolated, anonymous, despite being surrounded by people. That's another path to feeling disconnected.
Okay, so Durkheim saw this problem coming, in a way. Did he have any ideas about, well, solutions, how society could push back against anomie?
He did. He strongly believed that society itself needs to provide clear guidance, strong norms, solid structures. He talked about needing both social integration, feeling connected to groups, and social regulation, having clear rules to follow.
Integration and regulation, and what sort of structures did he think provided that?
Well, things like family, religious groups, schools, education systems, even professional groups or unions.
Ah, okay.
He saw these as places that give people a sense of belonging, they reinforce shared values, and they kind of provide a map for understanding your place in the world. They offer meaning, but also, importantly, restraint, limits on just purely individual desires.
So if those institutions weaken or maybe disappear for some people, that's when you get that problem of like infinite desires leading to frustration.
Exactly. Without those external anchors, desires can become boundless, which sounds freeing maybe, but Durkheim argued it often leads to anxiety, dissatisfaction, even despair. And it destabilizes society too.
It's interesting how this connects to other big ideas. The text mentioned Marx and alienation. How does that fit?
Yeah, there's definitely overlap. Both talk about feeling disconnected, right? But the key difference is Marx really pinned alienation specifically on capitalism, the worker being separated from their work, the products, other workers. Durkheim's Anomie is a bit broader. It's about the breakdown of social cohesion and shared rules in general, which could happen in different economic systems, though often linked to economic change.
Okay. Similar feeling, different root cause analysis, sort of.
You could put it that way, yeah.
And what about reification? That was Lukács, right?
Right. Reification is basically when we start treating social relationships or people almost like objects, fixed things, commodities, instead of dynamic human interactions. And this can feed into anomie and be fed by it. If you treat people like cogs in a machine, that can come from and also worsen the loss of shared purpose and those vital human connections that protect against anomie. When connection feels just transactional, shared values tend to erode.
So treating people like objects breaks down the very bonds that keep society and us grounded.
That's a good way to think about it. And then there was Tocqueville and his thoughts on individualism.
Yeah, the worry that people might just retreat into their own little private bubbles.
Exactly. While some individualism is obviously valued, Tocqueville worried that if people become too isolated, focusing only on their private lives and losing interest in public life or community ties, then those civic bonds weaken. And that withdrawal, even if it starts from wanting personal freedom, can eventually lead to a kind of atomized society, which looks a lot like an anomic outcome.
So it's a balancing act. We need individual space, but also that strong sense of belonging and shared rules.
That seems to be the takeaway, yes. A healthy society needs both.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up neatly then. Quick summary of the absolute key points on anomie.
Sure. So anomie, basically a state of normlessness, social rules breakdown, key thinker, Émile Durkheim. Causes, often rapid change, crisis, loss of that moral regulation, effects. Feeling lost, confused, purposeless, and in extreme cases, what he called anomic suicide, the proposed fix. Strong social groups, shared values, clear structures.
Got it. So going back to where we started, that feeling of being adrift on shifting sands, Anomie gives us a language, a framework for understanding it's not just, us. It can be a reflection of bigger things happening in society.
Absolutely. And just recognizing it, understanding the concept, that's maybe the first step. It helps make sense of why things might feel so uncertain sometimes.
Right. Which leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on. In this world that's changing so fast, technology, society, work, everything, what could be the new kinds of social institutions? What are the new shared moral frameworks we might need, or maybe need to build to help us navigate all this potential enmity? Worth thinking about, isn't it?